Your party's venturing along, minding their own business. Suddenly they look over towards the tree line and they see this. Alright, if this isn't a portal into the Feywild, I don't know what is. This looks like a zone of truth and the trees were telling lies. I imagine a wizard walking by and be like, now where did I leave my sphere of annihilation? Alright, so tell me in the comments, if you see this, what are you doing? Are you going on an adventure or are you running the opposite direction? Alright, I'm gonna finally throw my hat in the ring here on the discussion of alignment in D&D. Only really because I think I might have found a solution. Now, it seems like there's a lot of people that have an issue with the classic 9-block alignment system in D&D. Whether players don't understand the concept at all, whether they use it as an excuse for it's what my character would do, or whether just DMs entirely ignore it altogether. But I just found this. So I found this image, which is a 26 bubble alignment system. Now, don't get me wrong, you still have your traditional 9 circles, yes, but there's a total of 26 overlapping areas with new descriptions in each one of them. Let's dissect. At the top, you have selfless. At the left, you have chaotic. At the bottom, you have selfish. And at the right, you have orderly. Still might not be the best image. Hopefully you can screenshot it so you can read it a little bit closer. So starting at the top, you're a selfless individual. And as you get more orderly, you become what's called a charity or an idealist or even a guard, depending on how much you value law or potentially order. As you go the opposite direction, you become more of a pacifist, then a revolutionary, and then even a renegade as you get more chaotic. As you get more chaotic, your personal freedom is more important and you will fight for it. But as you lose a little bit of that selflessness, you become more selfish and come down. You become an individualist, even an opportunistic, or even a survivor. Just basically a hardened person, almost out for themselves, really. So at the very bottom, you have just a truly selfish individual who's only in it for themselves. But as you become more orderly, you become a meddler, an enforcer, or even a defender. So even though you might be selfish, you will still at least respect the order of things, and you might use that selfishness to kind of protect others, potentially. Now, on the right side of the spectrum is just pure orderly. Orderly is important to me, but depending on whether you are selfless or selfish, you again can be either the enforcer and defender, imposing your own ideas and selfish ideas of order, versus being a guard or an idealist, which is more selfless ideals of orderly fashion. And last but not least is the neutral circle in the middle, and if you look very, very closely, there's still even small slivers in each one of those as well. Now, don't get me wrong, this could be very super confusing to new players. I would maybe only stick with this for experienced or veterans players to add a further level of nuance to their morality and their ideals. I don't know, I know the 9-block system pretty well, but hey, that's just me, so what do you think? Tell me in the comments what you think about this, a new 26 bubble system for alignment. I was just thinking about a way that we could maybe fix the favored terrain function of a ranger from the Player's Handbook 5e. Alright, inspiration came from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, page number 10, and this is the Path of the Storm Herald Barbarian. Now, for the Path of the Storm Herald Barbarian, as you level up, you get different features, and these features are tied to the different kinds of terrains associated with it. For example, you have the desert, the sea, and the tundra. Now, my question is could we somehow tie that back into the ranger's favored terrain ability? Such as the ranger could get different benefits and perks depending on the kind of terrain that they're in. That he doesn't need to choose just one, or as he levels up 2 or 3 different kinds of favored terrains, but just depending on the terrain he's in, he gets a different kind of perk or new ability. That would make it seem a little bit less situational, because no matter what terrain you're in, you get a perk of some kind. Yeah, just kind of an impromptu random thought. Tell me, what do you think? Alright, Dungeon Masters, here's a little bit of a hot tip for you. Always have a spellcaster of some kind in the groups going after your players, especially if you think it's going to be challenging or possibly a TPK, and here's why. In about an hour, I'm going to be running the 4th session of the Out of the Abyss campaign with my buddies, and they're going to be probably dealing with some drow catching up to them shortly. So my advice comes from right here. If the Dark Elves reduce any characters to 0 hit points, the characters are knocked out rather than dying. Good way to keep a PC around instead of just killing them off, but on to the second part here. Even if one or more of the characters are accidentally killed, you can say that the enemy spellcaster is obsessed enough with them to cast Raise Dead and restore them to life. So maybe the enemy is just that vindictive and wants to further inflict suffering onto the players or not, but this is a good way to possibly gimp the players without killing them outright. So there you go, just make sure that one of your enemies coming after your players always has a good resurrection spell. Have fun. Jesus Christ, that looks like a real-life 8d6 bludgeoning damage per round. That's actually a really great idea for an encounter, you know, just weather.
This means that if they try and tell you who you are, that can actually change your stats.
That's actually a really cool concept. First of all, go back and watch the original video, but in a nutshell, it's basically saying that this game called Masks, you are teenage superheroes and there's a mechanic called influence. The game is suggesting that because you are teenagers, you're young, and therefore you are influenced by the world around you, depending on how the world perceives you, it can actually change your stats. So if your parents or your social circles or the world views you as a rebel, maybe you get some kind of bonus to doing more like rebellious or sabotaging or stealthy kind of things because you almost want to fit into that mold. I don't know of any other games that do that, but it would be very cool to see how that plays off in D&D. Might not work with adults, but then again, adults are impressionable too. You could even take it a step farther, like the video game Fable, where your physical appearance changes depending on your like good and evil or how people perceive you. Have fun.
If you have a caster that wants to focus on a different damage type other than fire, do you let them?
This is actually a very cool premise. I've never had it pop up in a D&D game before, once in a Shadowrun game, but go back and watch the original video for the full context. So he's basically saying if a spellcaster like a wizard or a sorcerer wants to have a specific elemental theme, like strictly ice damage or cold damage or strictly acid damage or whatever, as the DM, would you allow them to change the damage types of certain spells so that they would fit in with their particular elemental theme? I say yes, because that's how you get unique specializations for spellcasters, like strictly a pyromancer or a cryomancer or a venomancer, for poison, or a soundmancer, whatever it is. That might be a bard, but whatever. Some would argue that certain damage types are more powerful than others due to the resistances and likelihood to encounter monsters with certain resistances, like psychic. Arguably, 8d6 psychic damage would be more powerful than 8d6 fire damage, seeing as how a lot more monsters are going to have fire resistance than psychic. I would then say that I could change some of the resistances of the monsters. Sometimes a player setting off a trap can steal their agency. Let me explain. If a player is walking through a trap-laid area, and they're walking along and they take a step, give them the click moment. How many of y'all just got real anxious right now? So you tell the player that they hear a click noise, and you give them 5 or 6 seconds to say, what happens? Give that player and that character that, oh shit, I think I just stepped on a landmine moment. Honestly, it'll generate some pretty funny interactions and role-playing moments and gives way more value to the game than simply saying, you step on a trap, take 1d8 fire damage. Just my tip. Have fun. Here's a unique one-shot idea I call Cyborged. The added stipulation to this campaign is that all players must play a Warforged of some kind. You can even muddle around some of the racial attributes a little bit just so it all makes sense, but in a nutshell, all players are going to be cyborgs or robots of some kind. You can make this more advanced by giving players blank character sheets, and as they adventure, you can reveal their stats to them as they go. But before we get to that, all the players awaken to the sounds of alarms, and they're in a darkened laboratory. The last thing that they all remember is they fell asleep in their beds in the warmth and comfort of their homes next to their loved ones. They're confused and groggy as they look around the room, seeing other cybernetic organisms as well as scientists and robots. One very large and very deadly-looking robot has already escaped, and he's slashing and tearing apart the room around you. Several armed guards enter into the room and immediately dispatch the creature, but not before he ends up killing all 4 of them as well. Players hear over the intercom system that all cyborgs are to be considered a threat. That lab is on lockdown. They now have an opportunity to get out of their cells or out of their beds. As the players get up, they recognize that their bodies are not their own bodies anymore. They are twisted experiments of metal and weapon and limbs. It's all incredibly confusing, but there's not too much time because they need to fight for their lives. As they attempt to leave the facility, they're met with more armed guards, locked doors, traps, and more twisted cybernetic abominations that are attacking them relentlessly. However, you can make note that some of the players look into the eyes of some of the cyborgs and they can see fear, pain, confusion, almost the exact same emotions that they're feeling now. The players continue hacking and slashing through the maze-like laboratory until they believe they've reached the end. But of course, the Mad Doctor himself, the lead scientist, is blocking the path. He's got several cybernetic augmentations as well as another small force of robots at his side. As the lead scientist is about to be struck down, he pleads with the players for his life in exchange for the information on how they got there. He pulls them in close, very sadistically, telling them that they were all gassed in the middle of their night and taken from their homes. And all of the other cyborgs and robots that they've slaughtered on their way to freedom were in fact their own family members, neighbors, and friends. What the players do with this information is up to them. If the campaign continues on, so be it. But they're left with the horrors that they experienced at this laboratory. Alright, kind of dark and grim, I know. I'm running the Out of the Abyss campaign right now, so I'm all about that. But let me know what you think. Morning, everyone. About a month ago, I made this TikTok saying that I was going to take this gnarly-looking crustacean battleship and turn it into a D&D stat block. It was going to be an absolute gargantuan monster that has legendary actions as well as actions of the crew manning the guns on a battleship. So it was a little bit tricky at first, but what I decided to do is make the actions, the regular actions, be the crustacean monster, and the legendary actions be the crew manning the battleship guns. So this is an absolutely huge stat block. I have to break it down into two pieces, but this is the Rock Lobster. An absolute bottomless well of HP, over 700 hit points, great strength, constitution, and a little bit of armor. It's a siege monster, has legendary resistance, and it can hold its breath for up to 3 months. It's really not too intelligent on its own, but it will understand verbal commands from the captain. It's going to have a very basic multi-attack. It's going to pincer clamp enemies, and from there it can do one of two things once it has the enemy grappled. It can either clamp down in a vice action, dealing significant damage, or it can actually throw the creature a great distance, taking more damage as well. And with it being a gargantuan-sized creature, it is not a small amount of damage by any means. So now that's just the creature by itself, but what about the crew manning all the battleship guns? Sure, real-life battleships are usually manned by anywhere from 1,500 to upwards of 2,000 crewmates, but I figure for this one, they're probably going to be manned by anywhere from 100 to 200 or so. So the crew is going to be partaking in the legendary actions of this creature using small munitions, medium munitions, and the Big Bertha cannon. All of these different kinds of munitions are going to be dealing damage at different ranges and different types, including regular piercing, fire, or force damage. And the lair of the Rock Lobster is any area within 1,000 feet of it. Its lair actions consist of a frightening presence attack. Any water deeper than 3 feet out to a distance of 600 feet becomes turbulent and difficult terrain, or subjecting all nearby creatures to 1 round of the small rounds attack. So yes, this creature does seem pretty OP, but remind your players that the crew and the creature are separate. Who's to say that the players can't stealthily take out all the crew members on board and take over the Rock Lobster? Hey DMs, is your party getting a little bit tired of you just throwing generic spiders at them all the time? Don't get me wrong, the sight of a web is very ominous, and having your enemies crawling up and down on the walls and ceilings is very creepy indeed. Should you find yourself getting a little bit too bored with the common giant spider as well as the lesser utilized phase spider, you can always try spiders that simply erupt out of the ground. As demonstrated by my little buddy here. Just a quick reminder that this exists in real life. Hey Dungeon Masters, there's an item that exists in real life that can turn every single tavern keeper or bartender into a shadowy assassin. This little number right here is called the Assassins Teapot. And as you can see from this image here, it contains 2 chambers, one of a poisoned beverage and one of a non-poisoned. The concept of this being there's 2 air holes controlling the 2 different chambers, and by placing a finger over one or the other, you can control which liquid gets poured into which container. Very handy for taking out those targets stealthily during diplomatic missions. So this is quite good. If a player is going to be using this, I would say that they would have to have a successful sleight of hand check against a target's passive perception. And on the other side of the coin, the player needs to have a high enough insight roll as to see what's going on in front of them. Give your players one more reason to avoid those shady taverns on the bad side of town. Have fun. D&D DMs, what do you do when your campaign's ready to end but your players are not ready? Just simply meaning that they're ready to take on the BBEG and essentially end the campaign, but they don't want to end the fun just yet. My proposal and solution to the problem? Time travel. Not backwards time travel, forward time travel.
Before the final blow was struck, I tore open a portal in time and flung him into the future, where my evil is law.
That's right, take a page out of a playbook of many popular cartoons, have the BBEG in their final moments, take the players and send them far into the future where they can deal with them later.
Mr. Anderson, welcome back. We missed you. You like what I've done with the place?
This actually sets up for a very high-level campaign because the BBEG has had maybe decades or possibly even centuries to take over the entire planet, do their entire bidding. Now, the campaign is going to be at epic level and the players can continue on their story with similar characters in mind that they're going to be facing. But remember, time travel responsibly.
Your brood must be exterminated. You will not kill her or her brood. You must kill brood and mother. Get behind me. Your brood will seed all life on this planet. That doesn't make sense.
D&D DMs, what do you do when your campaign's ready to end but your players are not ready? Just simply meaning that they're ready to take on the BBEG and essentially end the campaign, but they don't want to end the fun just yet. My proposal and solution to the problem? Time travel. Not backwards time travel, forward time travel.
Before the final blow was struck, I tore open a portal in time and flung him into the future, where my evil is law.
That's right, take a page out of a playbook of many popular cartoons, have the BBEG in their final moments, take the players and send them far into the future where they can deal with them later.
Mr. Anderson, welcome back. We missed you. You like what I've done with the place?
This actually sets up for a very high-level campaign because the BBEG has had maybe decades or possibly even centuries to take over the entire planet, do their entire bidding. Now, the campaign is going to be at epic level and the players can continue on their story with similar characters in mind that they're going to be facing. But remember, time travel responsibly.
Your brood must be exterminated. You will not kill her or her brood. Must kill brood and mother. Get behind me. Your brood will seed all life on this planet. That doesn't make sense.
I like your funny words, Magic Man.